Chapter 1. The Signal in the Storm. The vast expanse of stars stretched endlessly beyond the observation window of the Vanguard. Captain Jax Carter stood silently, his gaze fixed on the swirling clouds of a nearby nebula. Despite the breathtaking view, his thoughts were elsewhere. Deep space missions had a way of dragging on, and after 6 months of traveling through uncharted territories, he longed for a distraction. But what he got was far more than he ever expected. "Captain, we've picked up a strange signal," said Lieutenant Maeve, the ship's communications officer, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the bridge. Jax snapped out of his thoughts and turned toward her. "A signal? From where?" Maeve's fingers danced across the holographic display. "It's coming from a planet in the sector ahead. The readings are odd. It's uninhabited, or at least, it's supposed to be. The atmosphere is toxic, and there's no known life form that could survive there." Jax furrowed his brow. "Are we sure it's a distress signal?" "Yes, sir," she confirmed. "The pattern matches emergency codes from several known species. But it's a mix, not from any one race. It's confusing." Curiosity piqued, Jax leaned over the console to examine the readings. The signal was faint but persistent. He knew the Vanguard's mission was to chart new star systems, but rescuing a stranded ship or alien species would surely be a welcome change of pace. The crew was restless, and he felt the itch for adventure once more. "Plot a course for the signal," Jax ordered. "I want to see what we're dealing with." As the ship veered toward the planet, a sense of unease filled the bridge. The planet in question, Rith 5, had been marked as a hazardous location by several exploratory vessels over the years. Its toxic atmosphere, violent electrical storms, and unpredictable terrain made it a death trap for any who ventured too close. But despite these dangers, something, or someone, was sending out a plea for help. By the time the Vanguard entered orbit around Rith 5, the storms had already begun. Lightning crackled across the planet's surface, illuminating the dark, swirling clouds below. "Atmosphere's too dangerous for a full crew landing," said Lieutenant Maeve. "We'll need specialized suits if we're going down there." Jax nodded. "I'll go alone." The crew exchanged nervous glances. They had all heard of Jax's reputation. He was a skilled engineer, fearless in the face of danger, and known for taking risks. But this felt different. The planet was hostile, the signal faint, and the odds of survival slim. Still, no one dared to question his decision. Within the hour, Jax was suited up and ready. The drop pod that would take him to the planet's surface was small and compact, designed for quick and efficient landings in dangerous environments. As he stepped into the pod, the door sealed shut with a hiss, and he felt the familiar rush of adrenaline as the launch sequence began. "Good luck, Captain," Maeve's voice came through his earpiece. Jax smirked. "I don't believe in luck." The pod shot out of the Vanguard's hangar and hurtled toward the stormy surface below. The descent was rough. Turbulence rocked the small vessel as it passed through layers of thick, noxious clouds. Jax gripped the controls tightly, adjusting the thrusters to avoid the worst of the lightning strikes. Moments later, the pod slammed into the ground with a jarring thud. Jax took a deep breath, steadying himself as the pod's systems confirmed a successful landing. He disengaged the hatch and stepped out into the hostile world. Rith 5 was as unforgiving as the reports had suggested. The air was thick with poisonous gases, and the ground beneath his feet felt unstable, as if it could crumble at any moment. Visibility was limited to a few meters ahead, and the sky was an ever-shifting swirl of dark clouds and crackling energy. But the signal was clear, and it was close. Jax activated his scanner and began making his way toward the source. Every step was a calculated risk as the landscape shifted and changed around him. Massive fissures opened and closed, and the ground occasionally shook with tremors, as if the planet itself was trying to reject his presence. After what felt like hours of navigating the treacherous terrain, Jax finally reached the location of the signal. What he found was unlike anything he had ever seen. Half buried in the rocky ground was a sleek, organic-looking structure, its surface a glossy, metallic black that seemed to pulse with a faint light. It was unlike any ship or building he had ever encountered. The design was entirely alien, with no visible entrance or markings. It almost looked alive. And then, he heard it. A soft, feminine voice echoed in his helmet, weak and pleading. "Please help me." Jax froze. He glanced around, expecting to see anyone, but the area was deserted. The voice had come from the structure itself. He cautiously approached the strange object, his heart pounding in his chest. As he reached out to touch the surface, the voice spoke again, this time louder. "Don't leave me, please. I'm trapped." Jax's hand brushed against the cold surface, and to his shock, the structure responded. It shifted, the material rippling beneath his touch as if it were alive. A seam appeared, and slowly, a hatch opened, revealing a dark interior. Against his better judgment, Jax stepped inside. Chapter 2. Into the Unknown. Jax felt the cold seal of the hatch as it clicked shut behind him, sending an unsettling shiver up his spine. The silence inside the alien structure was thick, as if the air itself carried weight. His helmet display adjusted automatically to the dim lighting, casting the area in a soft, eerie blue. Jax instinctively reached for his holstered blaster, though he knew it wouldn't be much help against an environment this alien. The interior was unlike anything he had ever seen before. It resembled no ship, no habitat, nothing that he could place from his years of experience as an engineer and space explorer. The walls, smooth and seamless, pulsed faintly with a bluish light that seemed to run through them like veins. Every few moments, the light would dim, then surge again, as if the structure itself were breathing. Strange, he muttered to himself as he slowly took a step forward, his footsteps echoing through the vast chamber. But the sound didn't fade as expected. Instead, it reverberated, growing louder, more resonant. It was as if the place was alive. "Hello?" Jax called out, feeling the overwhelming need to break the silence. His voice sounded small, swallowed by the space around him. There was no response at first, just the same rhythmic pulsing of the walls, but then came the voice again, the one he had heard on the surface. I am here," it said softly, the words tinged with a kind of weariness that tugged at Jax's heart. "You came for me." Jax froze, his pulse quickening. The voice was clearer now, though still weak. "Who are you? Where are you?" he asked, turning his head in every direction, trying to locate the source. "I am part of this," the voice replied, its ethereal tone reverberating through the structure. "This place is me." Jax blinked in confusion, his mind struggling to make sense of what he was hearing. "You're the ship?" he asked, taking another cautious step forward. "Yes, but no," the voice replied, faltering. "I am an entity, a symbiotic being. This is my body, but I am broken, trapped." The weight of those words hit Jax like a punch to the gut. He had encountered all sorts of alien technology and life forms in his travels, but never something like this. A living ship? A symbiotic organism? It was almost too much to comprehend, and yet, the voice carried a deep sense of sadness that was unmistakably real. "What happened to you?" Jax asked, his voice softening. He had no idea how to fix something like this, but he felt compelled to understand. "I was abandoned," the entity explained, its voice tinged with both sorrow and relief. "The ones who created me, they left me here, broken. I have been alone for so long." Jax's heart clenched. The idea of being left behind, alone in the cold void of space, was a fear he knew well. His years of service in the Deep Space Corps had shown him how merciless the universe could be. But to be trapped inside your own body, unable to escape, it was a fate worse than death. "How long have you been here?" Jax asked, his hand instinctively reaching out to touch the wall. The surface felt warm, almost alive, like the skin of some great beast. I do not know," the entity replied, its voice faltering again. "Time has lost meaning. Days, years, they blur together. But you are the first to come in. So long." Jax's fingers traced the wall as he moved deeper into the chamber. The further he walked, the more the environment seemed to respond to him. The faint pulse in the walls grew stronger, as if the entity were awakening from a long slumber. "I'm sorry," Jax said softly, though he wasn't sure why he was apologizing. "I didn't know you were here." No one did. The entity didn't respond right away. Instead, the chamber seemed to shift and change around him. The walls, once smooth and featureless, began to ripple, forming strange, organic patterns. It was as if the structure itself was alive, reacting to his presence. For a brief moment, Jax felt like he was standing inside the belly of some colossal creature. "I need your help," the entity finally said, its voice trembling. "I am broken, damaged. You must go deeper, into my core. Only then can you fix what is wrong." Jax's mind raced. He was an engineer, trained to fix ships, machines, and technology. But this was a living, breathing entity, and he had no idea how to even begin. Still, something in the entity's voice, the desperation, the pain, tugged at him. "Inside you?" Jax repeated, his voice thick with uncertainty. "Yes," the entity replied. "I am fractured. My systems are failing. My mind is scattered. You must help me. Please." Jax felt his throat tighten. He wasn't sure if it was the confined space or the gravity of the situation weighing on him, but he felt overwhelmed. Still, he couldn't just leave. This entity, this being, was pleading for his help. Abandoned, left to die in the void of space. It had no one else. And deep down, Jax knew that if he turned his back on it now, he would never forgive himself. "What do I need to do?" Jax asked, steeling himself for whatever lay ahead. The walls around him shifted again, this time forming a narrow passage that led deeper into the structure. The blue veins pulsed with a renewed intensity, lighting the way ahead. "Follow the path," the entity instructed. "My core, my heart, it lies at the center. You must reach it." Jax hesitated for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. This wasn't a simple repair job. He was about to venture into the very essence of a living organism, a being unlike anything he had ever encountered. But there was no turning back now. Taking a deep breath, Jax stepped into the passage, the walls closing behind him as he moved forward. The deeper he ventured, the more alien the environment became. The passage twisted and turned, the walls undulating as if they were alive, breathing. The blue veins grew brighter, casting strange shadows that danced along the walls. Jax felt like he was walking inside a massive creature, its very essence pulsing around him. As he continued, the voice of the entity grew stronger, more coherent. I was once whole," it said softly, the sorrow in its tone palpable. "My creators, they built me to serve them. But when I became damaged, they abandoned me, left me to rot here, in this desolate place." Jax clenched his jaw. The idea of abandoning something, especially something alive, didn't sit well with him. "Why did they leave you?" "They feared me," the entity replied, its voice tinged with regret. "When I malfunctioned, they believed I had become dangerous. They were wrong. I would never harm them. But their fear, it drove them away." Jax could hear the pain in the entity's voice, the deep sense of betrayal. He could only imagine what it must have felt like to be abandoned by those who created you, to be left alone in the dark, with no one to hear your cries for help. "I'm here now," Jax said softly, though he wasn't sure if his words would bring any comfort. "I'll do what I can to help you." The passage widened, and Jax found himself standing in a massive, open chamber. At the center of the room was a large, pulsating orb, glowing with a faint blue light. It looked like the heart of the entire structure, and as Jax approached it, he could feel the entity's presence more strongly than ever. "This is my core," the entity said, its voice filling the chamber. "I am weak, broken, but with your help, I can be whole again." Jax stared at the orb, his mind racing with questions. How was he supposed to fix something like this? It wasn't a machine, at least not in the traditional sense. This was a living, breathing being, and he had no idea where to even begin. But he had come this far. There was no turning back now. "Tell me what I need to do," Jax said, his voice steady. The entity's voice softened, a note of hope creeping into its tone. "You must bond with me, become part of me, even for a short time. Only then can you repair the damage." Jax's heart skipped a beat. Bond with it? Become part of it? This was far beyond anything he had ever trained for. But the entity's desperation, the sheer loneliness in its voice, made it impossible to refuse. "All right," Jax said, taking a deep breath. "Let's do this." Chapter 3, The Bond. Jax stood in the center of the pulsating chamber, staring at the glowing orb that represented the entity's core. His mind raced with doubt and uncertainty, but the entity's plea was impossible to ignore. It was more than just a call for help. It was a cry of desperation, a being on the brink of total collapse. Every part of him screamed to run, to retreat from the impossible situation, but he couldn't. He had come too far, and now, he was the entity's only chance for survival. "I don't understand," Jax said, his voice breaking the eerie silence. "What do you mean by bond? How am I supposed to help you?" The entity's voice echoed through the chamber, now stronger, more focused. "Your body and mind can connect with my essence. Together, we can restore what is broken, but it will require trust." A merging. Jax's pulse quickened. He had heard of advanced alien technologies that required physical or mental interfacing, but this was on a different level. This wasn't plugging into a computer or accessing a ship's mainframe. This was becoming part of a living, thinking organism, a bond that could change him in ways he couldn't even imagine. "Wait," Jax said, raising a hand as if to stop the process. "Are you saying I'll have to physically connect with you?" "Yes," the entity confirmed. "You will be inside of me, but only briefly. The bond will allow you to repair my core from within. Without it, I cannot survive." Jax's stomach twisted at the thought. His hand clenched involuntarily. Being inside a living entity, part of a symbiotic being. It was more than he had bargained for. He'd seen what could go wrong in interfacing situations, and while this was different, it felt just as risky. "How do I know this is safe?" Jax asked, his voice revealing the anxiety he was trying to suppress. "I've never done anything like this before." There was a moment of hesitation before the entity responded. "I cannot guarantee your safety," it admitted. "The process is unfamiliar, even to me. I have never bonded with one of your kind, but without it, I will fade, and you will be trapped here." Jax exhaled slowly, realizing that his options were limited. If he didn't take the risk, the entity would die, and with the hostile conditions outside, he might not make it back to the Vanguard. Even if he did, he couldn't live with the thought of abandoning a life form in need. "All right," Jax said at last, steeling himself. "Tell me what I need to do." The orb pulsed brighter, and a soft hum filled the chamber. "Step forward," the entity instructed, "and place your hands on my core. The bond will begin there." Jax swallowed hard, then walked toward the glowing orb. The air around it felt charged, filled with a strange energy that seemed to resonate with his heartbeat. As he reached out, his fingers trembled slightly, but he pushed past the fear and placed his hands on the smooth surface. Instantly, a jolt of energy surged through him, causing him to gasp. The sensation wasn't painful, but it was intense, as if his very being was being pulled toward the entity's core. His vision blurred, and for a moment, he felt weightless, disconnected from his physical form. The entity's voice echoed in his mind now, no longer distant but fully present. "The bond is beginning. Don't resist." Jax's body stiffened as the connection deepened. He could feel the entity's thoughts, its emotions, flowing into him. It was overwhelming, a flood of sensations that made it hard to think clearly. He could feel its pain, its isolation, the aching loneliness that had consumed it for so long. But beneath the despair, there was something else, hope. A fragile hope that he could save it, that together they could fix what was broken. "I can feel you," Jax whispered, his voice barely audible as the bond grew stronger. "And I can feel you," the entity responded, its tone soft, almost comforting. "You are different. Your mind is resilient. You can do this." As the bond solidified, Jax felt a strange warmth spreading through his body. His senses sharpened, and he became acutely aware of every part of the entity, its pulsing energy, its fragmented systems, the damage that ran deep within its core. It was like looking at a ship schematic, but instead of circuits and wires, it was veins of energy flowing through a living organism. "I can see it now," Jax said, his voice steadier. "I can see where you're broken." "Good," the entity replied, relief evident in its tone. "Now you must help me repair it. Follow the flow of energy, guide it back to where it belongs." Jax closed his eyes, focusing on the sensations coursing through him. He could feel the fractured pathways within the entity, the places where energy had been blocked or disrupted. Slowly, carefully, he began to direct the flow, guiding the energy back to its proper channels. It was a delicate process, one that required intense concentration, but Jax's engineering instincts kicked in. This was just like repairing a complex system, only on a far more intimate scale. As he worked, the entity's voice remained with him, guiding him, encouraging him. "You're doing it," it said, its tone filled with wonder. "I can feel the restoration. The pain is lessening." Jax could feel it too. The core pulsed brighter with each adjustment, the energy flowing more smoothly. The structure around him seemed to respond as well, the walls glowing with renewed life. The entire entity was coming back to life, and Jax was at the center of it. But just as he was nearing the final stages of the repair, a sharp pain shot through him. He gasped, his hands trembling as the connection wavered. "What's happening?" Jax asked, gritting his teeth as the pain intensified. "The bond is straining," the entity replied, its voice laced with concern. "Your mind, your body, they are not fully compatible with mine. The bond is unstable." Jax's heart raced. He could feel the strain, the tension building within him. If the bond broke now, both he and the entity could be destroyed. "I have to finish this," Jax said through clenched teeth. "I'm so close." "You must hurry," the entity urged. "The longer we remain bonded, the greater the risk to you." Jax nodded, pushing through the pain. He focused all his energy on the final adjustments, guiding the last of the fractured pathways back to their rightful place. His vision blurred, and his body felt like it was on the verge of collapse, but he couldn't stop now. He had to finish what he started. With one final surge of energy, the last pathway snapped into place. The core glowed brighter than ever, pulsing with renewed life. Jax felt the entity's relief wash over him, a wave of gratitude and joy that nearly overwhelmed him. "You did it," the entity whispered, its voice filled with awe. "I am whole again." Jax collapsed to his knees, his body trembling from the effort. The bond began to weaken, and he could feel himself being pulled away, back to his own body, his own mind. It was a strange sensation, like waking from a dream, but far more disorienting. As the connection faded, Jax felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had done it. He had saved the entity, restored its life. But as he stood, weak and exhausted, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The bond, though brief, had left a mark on him, one that he wasn't sure would ever fully fade. Chapter 4. The Aftermath. Jax stood there, swaying slightly as the final remnants of the bond faded away. His body ached, his mind felt stretched to its limits, but there was a sense of accomplishment that made it all bearable. The alien entity's core now pulsed with vibrant energy, its glow steady and strong. The blue veins that ran through the walls of the chamber had brightened, casting a serene light over the entire space. It felt alive, truly alive, for the first time since Jax had entered. "You did it," the entity said, its voice now filled with warmth and gratitude. "I am whole again, because of you." Jax took a deep breath, still trying to collect himself after the intense experience. "Yeah, I guess I did," he replied, his voice weak but filled with relief. For a moment, there was silence between them, a calm that contrasted with the chaos that had come before. Jax could feel the entity's gratitude radiating through the space, almost like an emotional current that flowed between them. It was overwhelming, yet comforting at the same time. He hadn't just repaired a machine. He had saved a life, a being that had been left to suffer in isolation for who knew how long. "I never thought anyone would come for me," the entity said softly. "You were unexpected." Jax gave a tired chuckle. "I wasn't expecting any of this either. I thought I'd just be patching up some broken ship, not this." The entity's voice softened, almost playful. "You are not like the others who left me. They feared me when I was damaged. But you did not run. You stayed." Jax wasn't sure how to respond to that. He had been in dangerous situations before, but nothing quite like this. Yet something about the entity had drawn him in. Its vulnerability, its plea for help. He couldn't ignore it. Maybe that was what made him different. He wasn't just an engineer or a captain. He was someone who couldn't turn away from those in need, no matter how alien or impossible the situation seemed. "Yeah, well," Jax said, rubbing the back of his neck, "I'm not exactly the running away type." The entity seemed to hum in agreement, the soft light in the chamber pulsing rhythmically. I know, and for that, I am grateful. Jax glanced around the chamber, noticing how everything seemed brighter, more alive now that the repairs were complete. The once dark, foreboding space had been transformed into something almost serene, like the inside of a living, breathing organism that had been restored to health. It was strange, yet beautiful in its own way. So, what happens now? Jax asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. You're whole again, but are you stuck here? Or can you leave? The entity's tone shifted slightly, becoming more thoughtful. I am not bound to this place. My creators designed me to travel, to explore the stars. But when they abandoned me, I was left here to decay. Now that I am restored, I can leave, but I need a companion to guide me. A partner. Jax's brow furrowed. A partner? You mean someone to stay inside of you? His mind immediately went back to the bond, the connection they had shared. It had been intense, almost too intense. The thought of living like that, constantly connected to another being, was overwhelming. The entity hesitated before answering. Not as we were during the repair. That was necessary, but not permanent. I do not need to be bonded like that all the time, but I do need someone who can communicate with me, guide me. I cannot operate alone, not anymore. Jax let out a slow breath. He hadn't expected this. He had thought the mission was simple. Respond to a distress signal, fix whatever was broken, and return to the Vanguard. But now, the entity was offering him something more. Something that went beyond a simple repair job. It was asking him to be its companion, its pilot, in a way. A part of him was tempted. The idea of exploring the galaxy alongside a living ship, experiencing new worlds and civilizations with a symbiotic being, was undeniably alluring. But then there was the weight of responsibility. Could he really leave his crew, his life aboard the Vanguard? What would they think? What would become of them without him? As if sensing his hesitation, the entity spoke again. I do not wish to take you from your path, Jax. You have your own life, your own journey. But if you choose to stay, to travel with me, I will ensure that you are never alone. I will protect you, and together, we can explore the stars. Jax remained silent, weighing the decision. His whole life had been about exploration, discovery, and pushing the boundaries of the unknown. But this was different. It wasn't just about exploring the galaxy anymore. It was about companionship, about forging a bond with an entirely different kind of being. And while that thought scared him, it also excited him in a way he hadn't felt in years. Finally, Jax looked up at the glowing orb in the center of the chamber. If I do this, what happens to the Vanguard? My crew? You can return to them, the entity replied. I can communicate with your ship. If you wish to stay with them, I will take you back. But if you choose to remain with me, I will respect your decision. Jax nodded slowly, the weight of the choice settling on him. He didn't have to decide now. He could return to the Vanguard, think things through, and make his decision later. But the possibility, the opportunity, was there, waiting for him. I need to think about it, Jax said at last, his voice steady but thoughtful. Of course, the entity responded, its tone gentle. I will not rush you. Take the time you need. Jax gave a small nod and glanced around one last time. All right, let's get back to the surface. My crew is probably wondering what happened to me. The entity's voice carried a note of amusement. They are worried, yes. I have been monitoring your ship's communications. They are quite fond of you. Jax chuckled. Yeah, well, I'd hate to make them wait too long. As if responding to his thoughts, the chamber began to shift once again. The walls parted, revealing a passage that led back to the surface. Jax took a deep breath and started walking, feeling the presence of the entity with every step. As they moved through the passage, Jax couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. He had come to this planet expecting nothing more than a routine mission, but instead, he had found something extraordinary. A living being, abandoned and forgotten, but filled with hope and potential. And now, he had a decision to make. By the time they reached the surface, the storm had cleared. The toxic mist still swirled in the distance, but the sky above was clearer, calmer. The Vanguard loomed overhead, a familiar sight that filled Jax with a sense of comfort. Thank you, Jax, the entity said softly, its voice now filled with peace. Whatever you decide, I will always remember what you did for me. Jack smiled faintly. Yeah, well, I couldn't just leave you hanging. As he prepared to board his drop pod and return to the Vanguard, Jax glanced back at the alien structure one last time. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was truly on the edge of something new. Something that could change everything. And maybe, just maybe, he wasn't ready to walk away from it.